Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today.
Welcome, and thank you for tuning in to the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily Ferrier, here to bring you some uplifting stories in these trying times. For our first story, researchers from the Imperial College London have invented a first-of-its-kind health tracking sensor for pets and people that can monitor vital signs through fur or clothing. The new type of sensor, which can detect vital signs like heart and breathing rates through fur and as many as 4 layers of clothing, could really make everyday wearables for pets and livestock a reality. Such devices could help owners keep track of their pets and keep track of their health and help vets monitor animals during surgery without the need for shaving. They could even help improve the work of sniffer dogs used to detect bombs and missing persons. For human use, they could provide a new way to measure vital signs over clothing without direct contact with the skin. Lead author, Dr. Firat Girder of Imperial's Department of Bioengineering said, "Wearables are expected to play a major role in monitoring health and detecting diseases early. Our stretchy, flexible, innovative heralds a whole new type of sensor that can track the health of animals and humans alike over fur or clothing." The research on this new class of sensors is published in Tuesday in Advanced Functions Materials. Unlike humans, for whom there are many fitness tracking devices, there currently aren't many wearable options for pets or other animals. The research suggests that one reason for this is that the current trackers cannot monitor vital signs through fur. This new Imperial-developed device is made of silicone water compostable materials, which house a microphone that pick up sound waves like a watery, squishy stethoscope. It's flexible and stretchy enough that it tightly molds to the shape of the fur, clothing, or body part it's placed on, squeezing out any sound-sucking air bubbles and preventing them from reforming. First author, Yasin Kotur of Imperial Department of Bioengineering says, "The sensor works like a watery stethoscope, filling any gaps between it and the subject, so no air bubbles get in it and dampen the sound." The sound is converted to a digital signal, which is then transmitted to a nearby portable computer so that people can track animals' physiology in real time. When researchers tested this device on humans in one dog, they found that it works through up to 4 layers of clothes, and that the sensor works best when the clothing or fur sits right up against the skin. And that's not the only way that dogs are becoming more like people. Here's a little segment about dogs with jobs. As well as health tracking, the researchers say that the sensors could help turn findings from sniffer dogs into measurable data. Sniffer dogs are trained to exhibit behaviors like sitting or barking when they detect target objects such as an explosive device or a person stuck inside rubble following an earthquake. When dogs alert to target objects, such as bombs, their heart and breathing rates increase because they are excited to be rewarded for correctly identifying their target. However, alerting behavior can be difficult to quantitatively measure. Researchers say their new sensor could establish baselines of normal heart and breathing rates, from which to quantify the level of excitement for each dog. This would be measured by how much their vital signs diverge from the norm. By measuring how excited the dogs are, an inbuilt algorithm might even be able to tell the strength of a dog's reaction to the smell it detects and work out how sure the dog is of finding a desired object. The sensors have only been tested on dogs and humans so far, but the researchers will try to adapt for use on other types of pets, as well as horses and livestock. Yasin said, "The next step is to validate our system further with animals, primarily focusing on sniffer dogs, and then horses and livestock later on." They're also integrating motion sensors to the system so that they can track animals' movements in real time. The software could use an artificial intelligent algorithm to indicate when pets are standing, sitting, or lying, as well as which direction they're facing and how their vital signs diverge from the norm. This could hook up to a smartphone app that could tell owners how and where their pets are in real time, which could come in a lot of use if the pet was to go missing, without the use of a microchip. Well, what is microchipping? A microchip is a radio frequency identification transponder that carries a unique identification number and is roughly the size of a grain of rice. When the microchip is scanned by a vet or shelter, it transmits the ID number. There's no battery, no power required, and no moving parts. The microchip is injected under the loose skin behind your dog's shoulder blades, and it can be done in your vet's office. It's no more visible or invasive than a vaccination. So, is that it? Not quite. The unique identification chip won't actually be any good unless you register it with a National Pet Recovery database. You'll want to use a recovery service that has access to different microchip databases and technologies. A service like AKC Reunite, for example, is a member of the American Animal Hospital Association lookup, so it can check against hundreds of registries' databases. When you register your dog's microchip, enter all of the relevant contact information. It's a good idea to include both landline, cell phone numbers for you and anyone else in your household who's responsible for ownership. You don't want to miss a call telling you that your canine companion has been found. So remember to keep your information up to date with the registry as well. While microchip technology is pretty mature, different registries offer different services. Some, including AKC Reunite, provide a lost pet alert that broadcasts your dog's information to a network of vets, shelters, and volunteers in your area. It's not a tracking device. Remember this. GPS devices and microchips aren't substitutes for one another. They're complementary, and each is useful in locating the dog in different ways, which is why this new bracelet could be this new thing that they're trying could be particularly innovative. Because while microchipping is important for identification of the dog, it's not quite going to find your dog. But we are one step closer with this new innovative product that's just come out. Stay tuned for more.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the importance of microchipping as well as different forms of GPS tracking to find your pets. Now that we're back, when an 88-year-old man was sent to the hospital with a broken hip, the firefighters who responded to the emergency call returned to his house to finish his yard work. Howard Storley from Rochester, Washington, has been diligently keeping his yard and property tidy since his wife passed away 5 years ago. When the Hardy Sr. was mowing his lawn last week, however, he fell and broke his hip. Since he also injured himself in a more isolated part of the world, in isolated part of his yard, no one could actually see him on the ground. For 4 hours, Storley was unable to move. Thankfully, a trio of middle schoolers who were walking in front of his house heard his cries for help and called 911. So whoever's their teacher, you're absolutely doing something right. 3 responders from the West Thurston Regional Fire Authority arrived on the scene and whisked Storley off to the hospital before spending the rest of their day addressing other community emergencies. Upon finishing their duties in the evening, they all agreed to go back to Storley's house and finish all of his yard work. There was no hesitation from anybody, longtime firefighter EMT Alexander Trotman told the Washington Post. We talked to our lieutenant and captain, and they were 100% behind it. We knew he'd been down for a while, he added. We figure the least that we could do was go back and help him out. The EMTs in this country can be pretty incredible. I think you'll all agree with that. So here's another story of EMTs going above and beyond the call of duty to make someone's day, even when they were having a terrible experience. Now, if you've ever tried, you know it isn't easy to roll a gurney through the forest. But that's exactly what a team of firefighters did for a hospice patient who wanted to visit the great outdoors one last time. For years, Edward Rice had been an avid park ranger who longed for the greenery of Washington. Unfortunately, the self-proclaimed nature lover also suffered from multiple sclerosis and the disease forced him to spend several of his final years in hospice care. During his stay at the Evergreen Health Hospice in Kirkland, the 62-year-old patient had been unable to go outside until March of last year, when he confessed to a hospice staffer that he wished he could take one last trip through his beloved local parks. The staffers immediately jumped into action so they could grant Reed's wish. After calling the Snohomish County Fire District and recruiting the help of several volunteer firefighters, Reed was taken on a peaceful voyage through Meadowvale Beach Park in Edmunds. For 3 hours, the firefighters carried Reed and his gurney through the forest. They would periodically stop at creeks and in clearings so that Reed could take in the scenery, and they even collected cedar branches from the ex-park ranger to smell. The wheels of a gurney are like a shopping cart, so very small wheels on a trail. And it wasn't like one of those running trails at all. It was like a hiking trail. And we would stop every so often, and he would just sit and listen. That quote comes from hospice staffer Leah Gardner, which she told to ABC News. He was just smiling the whole time. He kept saying he was so happy. He was incredibly grateful to us. As fate would have it, Reed passed away shortly after the outing, but his caregivers hope that the story will help others appreciate the emotional fulfillment of hospice care. People sometimes think that working in hospice care is depressing, Evergreen volunteers wrote on Facebook. But this story demonstrates the depths of the rewards that caring for the dying can have. In other related news, you might not think that an 83-year-old widower would have much in common with a pop star, but an awe-inspiring new video proves otherwise. 27-year-old Louis Tomlinson, one of the former members of the boy band One Direction. He and the widower, a former taxi driver named Richard, first started talking to each other after realizing they'd both experienced a similar amount of grief. Richard had been mourning the death of his wife of 60 years since she died of Alzheimer's complications in 2016. Tomlinson, similarly, had been coping with the death of his mother after she lost a battle with leukemia, and he'd recently lost a sister to a suspected heart attack. When Tomlinson met with Richard at his home in Yorkshire, he and the young musician were delighted to hear that Richard was a passionate singer. The Englishman mentioned that he'd made a list of things to accomplish with his wife before she died, but didn't get to finish. When Tomlinson offered to help tackle the bucket list, he accepted. Together, Richard and Tomlinson went on a roller coaster, flew a helicopter, got tattoos, drove race cars, and sang on stage for a packed stadium. As if this wasn't touching enough for you, Tomlinson then used footage from their adventures to make a music video for his song, Two of Us, which he wrote for his mother. This video feels particularly relevant and powerful to me, Tomlinson wrote on Instagram. Richard is a classic example of a fearless man who, in the light of a tragedy, still pushes himself to live with as much laughter and happiness as possible. I hope you enjoyed those touching stories. When we return from the break, another story about an elderly woman when we return.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back. Right before we left off for the break, we were talking about some incredible relationships between the elderly and people that are much younger than them, learning to cooperate and help each other out. And now, the astonishing moment that an 84-year-old woman managed to win a brand new car by sinking a golf ball from across a basketball court. Mary Ann Wakefield was given the chance to win a free 2020 Nissan Altima from a local dealership this weekend as a part of the Ole Miss men's basketball game at the University of Mississippi in Oxford. All Wakefield had to do was land a difficult 94-foot golf shot during a promotional segment of the game. And to the crowd's delight, the senior sank the putt with surprising ease, earning the 2020 Nissan Altima immediately. In other sporting news, surfing became the first and only U.S.-based global sports league to require equal pay for its female and male athletes, and state legislators are being inspired to follow in its wake. Back in September, the World Surf League announced that it would be awarding the same amount of cash prize money to its male and female counterparts. This is a huge step forward in our long-planned strategy to elevate women's surfing, and we're thrilled to make this commitment as we revel our new 2019 schedule. This is the latest in a series of actions that the league has undertaken to showcase our female athletes, from competing the same quality as waves as the men, to better locations and increased investment in its support. 17-year-old Caroline Marks became the first woman to win the same $100,000 prize as her male counterparts earlier this week when she won the first competition of the World Surf League's championship tour. Prior to the equal pay requirements being approved in September, female surfers were competing for about half of the prize money that was awarded to the male surfers. This week's tournament was the first time that both male and female first place winners were awarded each $100,000. Inspired by the innovation, California lawmakers introduced a bill last month which would require all sports competitors being hosted on a state property to award equal purses to their male and female counterparts. This is something you don't hear of a lot especially in the sporting world. Women are often overlooked and undervalued, especially in this part of society. So it's pretty incredible to see this changing and evolving, and to see people actively trying to alleviate this. According to Mercury News, surfing, beach volleyball, triathlons, and marathons already award equal amounts of cash prize money to their male and female competitors. But if the latest bill is approved, it could also spur other U.S. states to take positive action on behalf of their female athletes. This change is simply the right thing to do for the Women's Surfing League. And we'd like to thank the many advocates who've worked for decades to help advance women's surfing. We want to be at the forefront of pushing for equality in all walks of life, starting on the waves, and we feel very lucky to have women on tour who are very talented, iconic role models, and more deserve the recognition as they stand alongside our extraordinary male athletes. This is a huge advancement for female athletes, and I'm so happy to hear of it. But that's not only the advancement that happened last year. For the first time in history, the world's most prestigious mathematics prize was awarded to a woman. The Abel Prize was awarded to 76-year-old Karen Kalusa Umenbeck for her pioneering achievements in geometric partial difference equations, gauge theory, and integral systems for the fundamental impact of her work on analysis, geometry, mathematical physics. The award, which has been called the Nobel Prize of Mathematics, also comes with a $700,000 prize. According to the Norwegian Academy of Science and Letters, they decided to award the prize to her after her decades of scientific contributions, the most notable of which includes her work on predictive mathematics inspired by soap bubbles. Her theories have revolutionized our understanding of minimal surfaces, such as those formed by soap bubbles, and more general minimization problems in higher dimensions. In addition to being a mathematician, she is also a role model and advocate for gender equality in science and mathematics. As a child, she loved reading and dreamed of becoming a scientist. Today, she's contributing as a scholar at Princeton University as well as the Institute for Advanced Study, and she's one of the co-founders of the Park City Mathematics Institute, which aims to train young researchers and promote mutual understanding of the interests and challenges in mathematics. She's also co-founder of the Institute of Women in Mathematics program. This is created in 1993 to recruit and empower women to lead mathematics research at all stations of their academic careers. She also developed tools and methods in global analysis, which are now the toolbox of every geometer and analyst. Her work also lays the foundation for contemporary geometric models in mathematics and physics. The recognition of her achievements should have been far greater, for her work has led to some of the most important advancements in mathematics in 40 years. Even though it was a bit of a later recognition, we're still so happy that women are finally being recognized for their work. and their contributions. When we come back, some stories about none other than Tony Robbins. So stay tuned for those.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about advancements in equal pay for women when it comes to sports. And now, the family of Tony Robbins, in the world-renowned leadership coach, will celebrate his 60th birthday by giving back in a big way, by raising awareness and financial support for one of the most heartbreaking issues in the world today, child sex trafficking. A benefit concert in Los Angeles on Saturday evening will continue Tony's lifelong mission to end human suffering, with organizations donating 100% of the net proceeds to Operation Underground Railroad, a nonprofit mission whose founder is featured in an upcoming Hollywood film. Half concert, half party, the event, described as a force for good, will be held on February 29th at the Microsoft Theater and feature performances by Pitbull, Melissa Etheridge, Andy Grammer, Cold War Kids, and Leona Lewis, amongst others. The money raised from tickets, costing $125 to $5,000, depending on seating, will support the Our mission and help expand services to care for more children. We are forever grateful to Tony and Sage and their unwavering commitment to help us put an end to modern day slavery, said our founder, Tim Ballard, a former special agent at the Department of Homeland Security, who spent over a decade as an undercover operative in the field. With the funds from the event, Our will be able to rescue more children, enter new countries, and change thousands of lives. Launched in 2014, Our has rescued 3,000 survivors and assisted the arrest of 1,800 perpetrators worldwide. Ballard's story is coming to the big screen this fall, with the release of the feature film, The Sound of Freedom, directed by Alejandro Monteverde and starring Jim Caviezel and Mira Savarno, which focus on true events surrounding the creation of Our. The film's producer, Eduardo Virastigawi, said, "I'm grateful and inspired by Tony Robbins for turning his 60th birthday into a celebration of freedom, dedicated to rescuing thousands more children from being kidnapped for sexual exploitation. I'm also grateful for the Good News Network's continuous promoting the good news from around the world from over 2 decades. Millions of people are inspired by the Good News Network and are having Good News Network promote Tony Robbins' birthday is just another example. The Good News Network being where we found this story. Tony has devoted his life to helping people realize their passions and change their circumstances, said his wife, Sage Robbins. I cannot think of a better way to celebrate this milestone birthday than to support his commitment to our, with the goal of saving thousands more children from some of the worst conditions on the earth. Robbins will also get an executive producer credit on the feature film. Now, most people know Tony Robbins from his inspiring books, business talks, and infomercials on TV. But now, the motivational speaker is lending a helping hand to 3 humble nuns on the streets of San Francisco. They were in dire straits, having lived out of their building and fed hundreds of homeless people in the last 8 years. Their landlord declared that if the nuns wanted to stay, they'd either have to pay rent with a 60% increase or get out. Tony read about the plight of the Notre Dame Mary of Nazareth soup kitchen and decided to stop by while he was in the Bay Area on Friday. By the end of the hour-long chat with the nuns, Tony was so impressed by their compassion that he handed them a $25,000 check and promised the landlord that he would not try to evict them for the next year. He also promised them a $25,000 advance for the following year so that they could find a new place, continue their holy work. Tony's kindness has spurred others to create several crowdfunding pages to support their sister's work because their only source of income is selling their pastries at local farmers markets. Marilyn Richardson, president of Mason McDuffie Mortgage Corp. in San Ramon, set up one of the pages within 2 days, had raised more than $10,000. It was such a really sad story. It touched me, Richardson told the Chronicle. We're in the mortgage business, and we understand how the rental market has gone crazy, so it seemed like helping them was the perfect thing to do for us. I always love hearing really, really well off people that have made millions and billions of dollars on the kindness of other people, returning it back to them, because money can often corrupt people. But Tony Robbins has shown that even if you have worked really hard to make a lot of money, that doesn't necessarily mean that it should all be yours forever. You can't always just grip onto it. You should be spreading your wealth and giving it to the people that need it and aren't able to gain it as easily as you are. And just another quick story about that. If you knew about the Flint drinking water, clean drinking water in Flint is finally back again thanks to amazing volunteers, including entertainer Cher. Cher called a friend at the bottled water company Icelandic Glacial about sending shipments of drinking water to the city, and the company not only arranged it, but agreed to match her purchase. The singer and actress announced that more than 180,000 bottles, will be arriving at the food bank of Eastern Michigan on Wednesday to help those with the lowest incomes in the city. And the empty bottles can be returned to the food bank and recycled, with all of the proceeds going to charity. Over the weekend, poor residents got help from the nonprofit Communities First, which sent volunteers to door-to-door Saturday, installing 2,000 water filters at every affordable housing development in Flint. And 2 Muslim charities have donated 8,200 gallons of water in the past 2 weekends. So even charity is spreading all over the world, or all over America. When we come back, love, is it a universal language?
Pets bring such joy to our lives, and the GSMC Pets podcast is here to share in that joy. We'll tell stories of pets finding their forever homes, acting in unexpected ways, being helpful, or just being silly. Whether you love dogs, cats, llamas, reptiles, fish, or you've never met an animal you didn't like, the GSMC Pets podcast is for you.
Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking about the kindness and generosity of certain famous people with lots and lots of money and sharing it to the others in America that don't necessarily have the same access to income. And now, although love is a universal language, it may not always stand the test of time. That's why Great Big Story decided to talk to 9 couples from around the world about what it's been like for them to be married for more than 30 years. From Michigan to St. Paulo, from Ghana to the Philippines, each couple was asked about their own personal gripes, romances, and advice from decades of marriage. Although not all of the smitten seniors admitted to falling in love at first sight, they all agreed to the magic of their marriage, and it's only gotten better with age. Making a long-term relationship work is a feat that not everyone can claim to have conquered. While relationship experts can tell you the tips and tricks for their perspectives, sometimes it's best to go straight to the source. So here's advice from real couples who are in long-term committed relationships and what their biggest tips are in making a long relationship last. Go on trips together and separately. Travel is an important part of growing a strong relationship. It helps you deal with potentially stressful situations together, to problem solve, and to make some fun memories. But you have to have your own life too. That's why Holly Wolf said she and her husband Gary have taken many trips in their 30-year marriage, but they haven't always been together. We vacation both separately and together, she said. He's a hunter and an outdoorsman. I'm not, so it makes sense for him to go on those trips without me. I enjoy traveling with friends, so I do that without him. But we enjoy traveling together too, just the two of us. No, you're not always going to get your way. Anyone who's been in a close relationship, romantic or otherwise, knows that being close to someone for a long time can inevitably lead to some arguments. No one likes to be wrong, but you're going to be, and that's okay. The ability to admit that you're wrong can strengthen your relationship and allow small fights to end more quickly than they would if you were too stubborn to let it go. You have to be okay with not being right all the time, says Declan O'Connell, who's been dating his partner Rachel Eagleton for 2 years. Compromising is something that people always say, but you have to be able to put it into your daily routine. At the end of the day, you have to realize that you're happier now than you were before. even if they annoy you that day. Practice authentic appreciation. Being in a relationship inevitably means doing things for each other. But Todd and Diana Mitchum told Insider that their marriage works because they're thankful to each other for all acts of service, big and small. For us, appreciation is in every moment and with every small act. The Mitchum said, we pride each other regularly and thank each other for doing even the smallest things. We think that being authentic with appreciation keeps the fire alive because the couple that is always focused on the best in each person. With 3 kids, careers, and a full life, we make appreciation a top priority. It's fun and sexy to always be appreciated. Find an activity that connects you. Everyone has hobbies, but who knew that they could be used to bring you closer together? Darren Zier said that him and his wife of 15 years, Daisy, have found partner yoga to be something that's not only fun, but that centers the two and brings them closer together. Over and over again, we feel stressed or overwhelmed. We meet our yoga mat for a little date and do poses together, says Zier, who created a book about partner yoga. The physical contact and the breathing and stretching does wonders for our own mental states and our relationship. If yoga's not your thing, find out what is. Finding an activity as simple as coloring together at night could give you the time to reconnect and feel close to one another. Don't be afraid to seek help. Part of a nurturing and constructive and healthy relationship means you don't always have to go alone. Author Carol Tuttle says her 37-year marriage has benefited from some outside help, especially in the bedroom. We've worked with both sex therapists and coaches over the years to keep us exploring this part of our relationship, she told an Insider. Understand that people change. Partnership does not stop personal growth. If you're with someone for a long time, chances are the person you're with now won't be the person you're with 20 years down the line. And that can be a great thing. Phil Aziz told Insider that his 15-year marriage has benefited from he and his wife adapting to each other, making their lives work together. You change just as much as your spouse changes every day. When your spouse changes in a way that seems at odds with how you live your life, it's your life that's affected and your life that can change and adapt. Be ready and willing to adapt. And always remember, it's almost guaranteed that your spouse is adapting every single day to the changes they see in you. And lastly, be kind. If you don't have something nice to say, don't say it at all. The age-old adage has proved successful for Jamie Pfeiffer and her husband. Pfeiffer credits keeping ugly thoughts to herself or keeping her marriage strong. Our entire household practice is something called Think. Is it thoughtful, honest, intelligent, necessary? Is it kind? If it doesn't meet all 3 of these criteria, we don't say it. So hopefully you can take some of this advice into your relationships. And maybe they'll make them richer for you in the future. When we come back, this day in history.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. Before we took our break, we were talking about some incredible advice from people who've been together for a very long time and how they've been together for that long and kept their marriage fresh and exciting. And now we go over to the good news in history on today's date. Now, the day that I'm recording this is kind of a special date because it only happens every 4 years. It's February the 29th, a leap year. Now, if you're listening to this and thinking, what is a leap year? Leap years are years where there's an extra intercalary day that is added to the shortest month, which is February. The day, the 29th, is referred to as a leap day. Leap years have 366 days instead of the usual 365 and occur every 4 years. So why do we have them? Leap days keep our modern day Gregorian calendar in alignment with Earth's revolutions around the sun. It takes Earth approximately 365 days to circle around the sun, and this is called a tropical year, and it starts on the March equinox. However, the Gregorian calendar only has 365 days. If we didn't add a leap day onto February 29th every 4 years, each calendar year would begin about 6 hours before the Earth has completed its revolution around the sun. As a consequence, our time reckoning would not only slowly drift apart from the tropical year and get increasingly out of sync with the seasons, with a deviation of approximately 6 hours a year, the seasons would shift by about 24 calendar days within 100 years. And eventually, we'd be starting to celebrate Christmas in the middle of summer on the northern hemisphere. So, on today's date, we're going to start off with 80 years ago today, when the first African American actress, Hattie McDaniel, won the first Academy Award for her performance in Gone with the Wind. Born to 2 former slaves in Kansas, the youngest of 13 children, she not only became an actress of stage and screen, but a professional singer and songwriter and comedian, which you can tell in her performance. Hattie was barred from the film's world premiere because of segregation laws in the South and the Atlanta Theater. And when her co-star, the great actor Clark Gable, refused to attend because of the color band, McDaniel encouraged him to go. It was a quarter century before another black actor wore the golden statuette. First in 1963 by Sidney Poitier, who we recently celebrated for his birthday, and Louis Gossett Jr. for An Officer and a Gentleman. And then in 2001 by Halle Berry. Her speech, accepting the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress, can be seen online, and I highly recommend you watch it. For more good news on this day, composer Antonio Rossini was born in Pesaro, Italy in 1792. It's a pretty cool birthday to have, isn't it? Finland initiates winter war peace negotiations in 1940 on today's date. And someone we talked about earlier was born in 1960 on today's date. Tony Robbins, the motivational speaker for which we had a nice big segment about. Gordie Howe made the NHL history with Hartford Whalers when he scored his 800th NHL goal in 1980 on today's date. So, like I said earlier, today is a leap day. Anyone with a birthday on February 29th gets only 1/4 of the actual celebrations enjoyed by the rest of us. So every person that was born in a leap year should be 4 times as happy, right? Now, you know how I said that it happens every 4 years? Well, that's not 100% true. If the tropical year was precisely 6 hours longer than the calendar year, we could use the Julian calendar, which adds a leap day every 4 years without exception. The deviation will grow to exactly 24 hours over the 4 years, and the Earth would need exactly 1 day to catch up to the position in the orbit it was 4 years prior. However, the deviation between the common year and the tropical year is a little bit less than 6 hours. The Gregorian calendar addresses this by employing a slightly more complicated set of rules to determine which years are leap years. It's still not perfect, but the resulting deviation is very small. In the Gregorian calendar, 3 criteria must be taken account to identify leap years. The year must be evenly divisible by 4. If the year can also be evenly divided by 100, it's not a leap year, unless the year is also easily divisible by 400, then it is a leap year. According to these rules, the year 2000 and 2400 are leap years, while 1800, 1900, 2100, 2200, 2300, and 2500 are not. However, there was a special leap year in 2000 that was somewhat unique, as it was the first instance when the third criterion was used in most parts of the world since the transition from the Julian calendar to the Gregorian in 1582. Who invented leap years? Leap years in the Western culture were introduced over 2,000 years ago by Roman general Julius Caesar. The Julian calendar, which was named after him, had only one rule. Any year divisible by 4 would be a leap year. This formula produced too many leap years, causing the Julian calendar to drift apart from the tropical year at a rate by 1 day per 128 years. And this wasn't corrected until the introduction of the Gregorian calendar more than 1,500 years later. The Roman calendar added an extra month every few years to stay in sync with the seasons, similar to the Chinese leap year. And there are alternative leap years in many cultures, such as Chinese calendars, Ethiopian, Hindu, Persian, Islamic, Jewish, and Buddhist calendars. There's some interesting customs, such as women proposing to their men. According to Irish legend, or possibly history, St. Bridget struck a deal with St. Patrick to allow women to propose to men every 4 years. This is believed to be introduced by the balance of traditional rules of men and women in a similar way to how the leap day began. And that's it for me. So thank you for listening to the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. and rate the episode. It really helps us. And please follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Thank you, and have a great night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcasts on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows. From the GSMC Podcast Network, from social media news to marketing news, and even weird news, the GSMC Podcast Network has you covered. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts, America's Still Beautiful podcast.